Guy. Oh, sorry, I thought it was Gislan.
No, not Ghislaine. Ghislaine is with the grants.
Okay, okay. I was wondering. It's like,
Guy Leme.
oh, perfect,
Leme
perfect.
and Victor Ayong, who is the knowledge management lead for Waka. So but they are all Guy Leme stepped out, and then Victor Ayong, I think he's in the conference room. So
Yes, yeah, perfect.
yes.
Okay, let's see, we have. Yeah. Okay, just so everyone knows as well, I can see that we're now recording and it is live on Facebook. So just so everyone is aware that that has started. And I'm just waiting now to see. I see we have 16. Yeah, okay, perfect. So we'll go ahead. Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I really appreciate all your time, especially to our guest speakers, Esther and Angela. It's great to have you on this call. So just before we begin, as I said, just so everyone knows, this is being recorded and streamed live on Facebook. Also, just throughout the session, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put it into the chat box and we can come to the questions at the end if that is okay with everyone. So just so everyone knows, obviously, this morning we will take an in-depth look at education and gender equality in the context of West Africa, and Plan International's work and examine the impact that crises such as food insecurity have on both education and equality for girls and women. Within that, we will look at what needs to be done to ensure that progress made on education and gender equality in recent years is not rolled back, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm sure many people on this call have heard that said on numerous other webinars or whatnot, that we really need to ensure that we do not in any way roll back on the progress that has been made over the last few years and decades. We had been planned to be joined by a colleague based in Burkina Faso this morning to speak about education, but unfortunately they could not make it. Instead, I will start off our conversation by speaking about the importance of education for children in development and humanitarian contexts, look at the impact of food insecurity on children's access to education, and explain how COVID-19 has exacerbated children's vulnerability to losing out on education. And following this, we'll have Angela Nnoko, Gender and Inclusion Specialist with Plan International in the Lake Chad region. So she will speak to us about the impact of food insecurity and other emergencies on gender equality in the region. And after Angela presents, we will be joined by Esther Badvam, a 23-year-old teacher and youth activist from Mokolo in the far north region of Cameroon, about the impacts of food insecurity on youth. So that is going to be the run of this hopefully 1 hour session. So I will begin. So just an introduction to Plan International Ireland and education in West Africa. As everyone knows here, I think especially this year, wherever you're based in the world, education is crucial for all children. And this is particularly true for children in development and humanitarian contexts. For these children, access to education simply can be a lifeline for them and their families, and provides a route out of extreme poverty. Plan International Ireland focuses much of our work on ensuring that children in some of the poorest and most vulnerable parts of the world are in education. We are working with Plan International colleagues and partners in West Africa, as you can see by this call, to ensure that children can access quality and inclusive education. We are thankful, very thankful for the support of Irish Aid in this endeavour, especially, in particular for their support for the EQUIP programme in Burkina Faso, Mali, Guinea and Guinea-Bissau, and also for our HPP programme in Cameroon, Niger, CAR and Jordan. Thank you very much to all and anyone who is on this call from Irish Aid. Generally, the central objectives of these programs are to basically give children access to quality education and so that they're supported to stay in school. Education is inclusive, particularly for girls and children with disabilities who are too often excluded from education, and that education is participatory and engages all those who are interested in improving education standards, including parents, teachers, and community leaders. And this is something that we really do strive for, that when we do education in these countries and programs, we are trying to build in that sustainable approach where you are building the knowledge of the teachers and you're building the knowledge of the community on how important education is, and particularly for girls. In addition to our education programs in Borno State, Nigeria and Cameroon are also ensuring that children who are impacted by the effects of protracted crises and conflict can access education. So for example, in Cameroon, very close to Mokolo where Esther is, there is Minawau refugee camp where we have our HPP program. And I have firsthand seen the amazing work that has been able to carried out there, and the education activities that we carry out, and really the value of having those educations, especially in a refugee camp with people who are coming from very, very unfortunate circumstances and coming from different crises across the border in Nigeria. And also we do work with the host communities as well. So ensuring that we are building up the host communities as well as the people within the refugee camps to ensure that it is a sustainable approach. And also we do early childhood education. So it's, you know, children as young as 3, 4 and 5, kind of the equivalent of what we'd have as senior and junior infants, which is not provided in the actual Cameroonian education system, but we do provide that for the children within the camp and host communities, just to make sure that there is that sort of continuity in life, and just a bit of what do you say, a bit of just a kind of access for meeting other children, and to start basically their learning and education as young as possible, so when they go into the actual formal education system they are ready to go. And when crisis strikes, children and adolescents are vulnerable to missing out on education, and the risk of this happening has increased exponentially recently. We are going to look at food insecurity in West Africa, why food security and nutrition are central to ensuring children can access education, and how the COVID pandemic has made the situation worse for millions of children in West Africa. So just to give a bit of context about food insecurity in West Africa and education. Well, just to also say, in 1996, the World Food Summit defined food security as this: food security exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. So that is the definition of being food secure. In recent years, though, there has been a global decline in food insecurity. However, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, by 2014, sub-Saharan Africa still had the highest proportion of undernourishment, with 1 in 4 people in the region experiencing food insecurity. So they did not have that access to nourishing sustainable food every day. Looking more closely at this situation in some of the West African countries where we concentrate our work currently, we can see how food insecurity manifests and impacts those who are already in the most vulnerable and precarious situations. So for instance, in Mali, in a country where we have our EQUIP program, the World Food Program in 2020, so just this year, cited how frequent drought, armed conflict and widespread insecurity have contributed to a progressive deterioration of livelihoods in the country. Poverty is on the rise, affecting 78.1% of people, and food insecurity levels are twice as high in families headed by women. And this just isn't just the case in Mali. We do see that in other countries. Ever since the 2012 crisis hit, 3.6 million people in Mali, so approximately 18% of the population on average, experience food insecurity, including 600,000 people who are severely affected. Food insecurity varies from one region to another, with the north and central regions, including Timbuktu, particularly affected. 1 in 8 primary school aged children do not attend school. Of those enrolled in schools, only 1/3 are girls. And this has been, and we will discuss in a few moments, how this has been exacerbated because of the COVID situation, but also as well, just to say that the current climate crisis also exacerbates these, because they're more ongoing drought and ongoing unsustainability leads to more conflict, which leads to more displacement, which leads to basically a lot of less people in school. So unfortunately, we are not seeing this going in the right direction. And then another example in Nigeria, around 110 million people, representing so over 60% of the total population, live below the poverty line. Primary school enrollment rates are estimated at 70% for boys and 60% for girls. Unfortunately, we can see that the Boko Haram insurgency has served to heighten food insecurity for children and families in the country. Also, in Guinea-Bissau, around 70% of the population live below the poverty line. Primary school enrollment, attendance and completion rates are low across the country, though there are regional disparities, and chronic malnutrition affects 27.6% of children under 5. So that's not just malnutrition, it's chronic malnutrition. And then in Niger, so one of our HPP countries, in 2017, it was estimated that more than 1.5 million of the 18 million population were affected by food insecurity. Another 1.5 million were estimated to be chronically food insecure, and millions more experienced transitory shortages during the lean season. So basically, there is that period of time where all the crops and seeds that were gathered are gone, and you really are living off nothing. 42% of children under 5 years of age suffer from chronic malnutrition, and 10.3% are acutely malnourished. And then finally, in 2019, in Burkina Faso was facing one of the fastest growing displacement crises in the world. A total of 3.3 million people are estimated to be facing acute food insecurity, and then with the COVID-19 pandemic contributing to a large increase in the numbers facing hunger. So unfortunately, as we can see from the above figures, the negative impacts of food insecurity and malnourishment are extensive for children and adolescents. In early childhood, boys and girls are equally likely to be malnourished, but as they do approach adolescence, the impact of malnutrition is more severe for girls and young women, who are far more likely to suffer from anemia. And ultimately, food insecurity, particularly in the early years of children's lives, leads to malnutrition. And this is then linked to poor cognitive development in children, frequently resulting in lower education achievements and outcomes. So I think this really just iterates how important it is to really at the beginning, from early childhood, to ensure that children are getting getting some sort of food security, and whether that is in education or somewhere, it just shows how important that is. Now I will just talk about basically, unfortunately, how COVID-19 has exacerbated food insecurity and restricted education. So what I've just spoken about is where we were at, but now it's unfortunate kind of looking at, because of COVID-19, where we could be going. So on the 21st of April 2020, the World Food Programme warned that unless swift action is taken, some 265 million people worldwide, so double the numbers from last year, face acute food shortages. This was forecast in a world where some 144 million children under 5 years were already malnourished, and 47 million children were already experiencing acute malnourishment. And this is, again, sorry, this was the 21st of April. So this is, 8 months ago, and or 9 months ago, and I think we can say that the situation has deteriorated, and obviously it's different for every country, but unfortunately COVID-19 has lasted a lot longer and spread a lot wider than I think people expected. So the likes of lockdowns and restrictions put in place across the world, everywhere, to prevent the spread of COVID-19 resulted in 743 million girls being out of school. So girls are more likely than boys not to return to school when they are out of education. Teenage girls are a particular risk in these cases of then being subjected to harmful practices or facing adolescent pregnancy, meaning they will never return to school. And we already have seen this. There already have been studies done where we have seen this, whether it's due to conflict and crises, why children have been out of school, such as the Northwest, Southwest region in Cameroon, or because of COVID-19, we already are seeing the impacts of girls, especially, not reverting back to school. So the importance of keeping them in school was extremely important. So in West Africa and the Lake Chad Basin in particular, food insecurity increased following the onset of the pandemic. This was in part due to the increased cost of food and exacerbated by the restrictions of people's movement. So not only were supply chains were impacted, it became far more difficult to access food. People could not travel to or congregate in market settings to buy and sell food items. And according to Plan International's report on the impact of COVID-19 on youth in the Lake Chad region, some children began to engage in illegal activities, including theft, when they lost their livelihoods. And several NGOs had to curtail their activities in the region, meaning that food distribution activities were suspended. Again, for the safety of communities and the safety of our own colleagues and all staff, we had to, unfortunately, suspend some activities. Furthermore, for many children experiencing food insecurity in West Africa, educational settings are a place where food is provided. So when schools are closed as a result of the pandemic, children lost out on a source of food and nutrition. So this is something I think that's actually been seen right around the world. And for example, in the UK, I think it's Marcus Rashford, he's a footballer. I'm not good at football, I don't know. But he was advocating for children to actually receive food during lockdown and while the schools are closed. And we have seen obviously the exact same. When we do a education program, we really try to, if it's possible, to build in a food program within that education setting. It is not always possible, but absolutely it is essential to ensure that children can come to school if they know, and their family knows, most importantly, that they will be getting at least one stable meal. That really is a massive incentive, I think, for families especially, to send their children to school. And aside from the impacts that school closures have had on malnutrition for children, they are also facing social isolation. and an increased risk in violence as support structures and social infrastructure have collapsed, and access to information that allows children and adolescents take control of their sexual and reproductive health and rights is no longer available. So it's not just obviously education as we know it, it's everything, menstrual hygiene management, sexual reproductive health education. These are also a part of that, that kind of what we try to provide. So when that's not available, everything is basically has been off the table because of COVID-19. But we have responded as Plan International. We have tried to continue our activities, and we have been working with our partners in West Africa to ensure that children can still access education, are protected from COVID-19, and have access to food supplies and other essentials throughout the pandemic. So for example, in Timbuktu, Mali, we navigated the numerous challenges posed by COVID-19 to continue providing children with education. Community leaders arranged for educational modules to be broadcast on local radio stations. Community leaders and women's groups were also engaged in COVID-19 awareness raising and prevention sessions, as were local children in schools and kindergartens. And finally, we also provided vulnerable families with food and schoolgirls with dignity kits so they can manage their periods from home. And we also did this again, for example, in Cameroon, we provided radio so that there could still be online radio education especially for children who were in exam years. And also with the help of Irish Aid, we provided radios in Sierra Leone as well. So we really, like everywhere else in the world, try to continue because we need to ensure that there is that continuity for children and making sure that there is still that engagement. So looking ahead, we know that children's needs must be central to global and national responses to food insecurity and the impacts of the pandemic. Children must be supported to return to education, and this must be a priority for governments. And at this, we are obviously, we never stopped advocating with governments and discussing with communities and families the importance of education for their children, especially girls. And Plan International across the world continues to do so. And this is why at no stage did we ever let up on any activities. Although some maybe had to be suspended, we continued that awareness raising across the board, whether it was on the radio or if possible TV stations, because the importance of education just cannot be underestimated for so many reasons, not just nutrition, but the social aspect. And again, that to give some continuity to a child's life is invaluable. And with that, I'm going to pause here on education, and I'm just going to hand over to our second speaker, Angela Nnoko. So Angela is a gender and inclusion specialist, as I've said at the beginning of this call. She holds degrees in gender studies, sociology, and anthropology, and has over 8 years of experience working for gender equality and women's empowerment in fragile societies and societies in transition. Angela holds the position of Regional Gender and Emergency Specialist with Plan International with the Lake Chad Programme. Prior to joining Plan International, she worked for UN Women's Regional Office in Dakar in the capacity of Gender and Emergency Analyst for 4 years. She also has working experience with organizations such as Nordic African Women, Swedish Red Cross, and Femme Centre. Her key focuses include building and strengthening the capacities of humanitarian actors on gender and humanitarian action, developing advocacy key messages on gender and inclusion in humanitarian response, as well as providing technical guidance on mainstreaming gender in humanitarian context. And issues close to Angela's heart include women and youth empowerment, youth leadership, and children's rights. So honestly, thank you so much for joining us, Angela, and we are so delighted to hear from you today, especially with all that fountain of knowledge that you have. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stacey, for having me. It's a great opportunity. So I will start by thanking you also for the brilliant background that you've shared with us today. It makes my work even easier as you've touched on some of the key points that I also have to share with our colleagues, the world that is joining us online, be it here in through Zoom or the Facebook Live, which is also being streamed right away. So the issue of food insecurity is alarming in the region, West and Central Africa, particularly the Sahel and the Lake Chad regions, where I work or where I've had the opportunity to work with. But I would also like to emphasize here that the issue of food insecurity is recurrent and dispersed. There are some seasons or there are some years that some areas might be food secure, but the next season or the next year, because of one reason or the other, be it drought or lack of rain, that area might be food insecure at that particular. So that's what I'm talking about, the issue of dispersion. But recurrent, it means something that occurs more often. And this has had, negative consequences on humans, such as malnutrition in children, starvation in extreme cases, which has also in turn, led to or contributed to social unrest within communities. But how does this food insecurity come into being? As I said, there are some being man-made or natural forces that leads to it. For example, talk about drought, locust outbreak in the region, which is something very, very, alarming. Armed conflicts, which is one of the issues that you earlier mentioned. Displacement of community, transhumance, and most recently, we have the COVID-19 pandemic. So in the region, I think you've given a lot of statistics, which is like, I also had the same thing, like almost 2.2 million people in the Lake Chad region where I work, because that is my area of jurisdiction right now. 2.2 million people in the Lake Chad region are affected by malnutrition, and 7.2 million, if I'm correct, are food insecure. So the statistics is really alarming. So the issue I hear people asking themselves, is food security or insecurity a humanitarian issue? Of course it is. It is no doubt that food is a human right issue. When you talk about human rights, food is one of them, and that is the more reason why it is being underscored in one of the 17 SDG, which is SDG number 2, if there's anything someone must remember here, which is zero hunger. So it really puts or places emphasis on the importance of food security for sustainable development. We are aware that no society has ever maybe attended development without being food secure. So food security, it is very, very central in whatever we are doing. So in case of the importance of food within our region, especially for children below 5 years old, we know that it's really, really important because it helps for brain development. Even as an adult, if we don't feed well, as I said, there are some health consequences that we might have, especially women that are breastfeeding or lactating mothers, adolescent girls, and this is something that really, really has to be looked into keenly and urgently. So what I'm trying to also add here is that this issue of, compounded or multiple crises that we have in the region also kind of exacerbates the issue of food insecurity. Talking about the Boko Haram conflict, talking about COVID, as I earlier mentioned, all this, if people are moving, running away from their life, those whose predominant activity is agriculture to provide for themselves, and maybe the rest of the population who cannot engage in agriculture. And if people are on the move, obviously, they won't cultivate crops that people will feed or people will go and purchase maybe in the market or wherever they're taking it. So it is really important to say here that food security, insecurity in the region, has, also contributed to other factors such as exacerbating gender inequality in the region. For example, during the outbreak of COVID, because I'm trying to relate this with COVID, when we had the COVID, we rightly mentioned we had governments that kind of instituted national measures to prevent or the widespread of the disease, and some of them was total or partial lockdown of borders, even internal movement within regions or within cities, urban to urban cities. And for example, I live in Cameroon, where the urban area depends on the rural area for food supply. And the movement was restricted. So we saw that food supply became very, very limited, and which also in turn like skyrocketed the prices of food in the market. A person, we know that, for example, in Western Central Africa or for the Sub-Sahara, there are some people who live less than $1 a day. And because of this increase in prices, some people had to go without food, or some of the meals that they depended on for nourishment or for important nutrients were not available because people could not longer move, or goods could not longer move from one region to another. So looking at the the engagement of be it men or women within the agricultural system in the region, I would say that both men and women are engaged in the agricultural system, but you will find that men are more inclined to cash crop production, whereas women are more on food crop production. And this has kind of had an impact, which I would say a negative impact, because of the social and cultural arrangement or structure of our society. The man, or for example, piece of land is being, prioritized for cash crop production, which is at times most of the crops are not even being consumed; they are being exported or being sold for them to have finance for, to meet other family needs. And food crop production itself, which people even depend on, is being, less prioritized. And being that women are those who are engaged in this milieu, they have to depend on men's like goodwill for them to even have a piece of land for them to crop. So in places where you even have droughts, and because of drought and hot climatic changes, some of women even had to plow as much as 2 or 3 times like what they did before, when they had like the rainy season or when they had like good weather conditions, in order for them to have enough or the same food quantity that they had before. And since the men, they are the owners of land, they will always have to prioritize, their cash crop production. For example, we have cotton in the Sahara region, in the Lake Chad region, we have cocoa, we have coffee, and others, they have rubber in certain of the forest region. So this has also had the impact for women and girls, especially now that we have the COVID pandemic. We also have drought. People have to plow as much as 2 or 3 times to have the same quantity of food to feed the women. And whenever this additional manpower is needed, because the societal arrangement makes that it is the woman that provides, food for the family, it will obviously be for the girl child. If they have a girl child in that family, maybe she was in school already, and we've seen that girls have been pulled out from school, to come join or to provide additional labor force for them to have enough food for the family. But also, we have seen that because of this food insecurity or food shortages in communities, parents now have resorted, to negative coping strategies or mechanisms. We've had issues of early and child or forced marriages within the region, and a research that was also carried by the Lake Chad program, Plan International, on the impact of COVID-19 on youth, for example, clearly, brought out some of these elements, youth that we had the opportunity to talk with or exchange with, told us or informed us that some of them, their colleagues, had to descend into early or forced marriages because the family saw it as a means of extra, income or even food, because some of them are being exchanged like commodities. So this has also, had an impact or increased gender-based violence, of which early child marriages is one of them. But also, we've had the issue of increased domestic or partner violence during the COVID-19 pandemic alone. In the Sahara, 12%, I think they noticed an increase of 12% of intimate partner violence, which in turn has a negative repercussion on the health status of women and girls, because the violence was mostly by men on women. So I would like to also highlight here that women and girls, in some communities, they are the last to eat, because it is their role for them to provide for the family. So in some situations, they have to eat the last after everybody has eaten. And in some cases, they eat the last. That is even the best case. In the worst case, they will even go without food. Also, looking at the societal arrangement in the Lake Chad or Sahel region, in times of plenty, we have these granaries that they store the food, be it sorghum or millet. Despite that, it's mostly food that was cultivated by women, but the control, except in female-headed household, but where there is a male head of the house, he is the one in charge because they do have to ration when there is less food. So he's the one in charge, and it even becomes worse in families that they are polygamous in nature. In a family that a man has 2 or 3 wives, maybe the least loved wife might even go without food, whereas the one that is most loved will have to go with food. Or at worst, the men could also decide to sell the food in exchange for cash and prioritize certain needs that might not be for the whole family. So all these issues come into play, and we really see the gender inequality, the power imbalances that play to even exacerbate this within our communities. So as I said, I would not want to emphasize so much on the statistics, on the people or women that are involved in agriculture, but maybe I could highlight 1 or 2. In Mali, as you said, up to 73% of the people engaged in agriculture are women. In Burkina Faso, I think it's 93 in Burkina Faso, whereas in Mali it's 73. But in Cameroon, for example, where I am based, close to 60 to 70% of the agricultural force is the women and girls. So I also talk about the issue of women having to work twice as much as possible to have the same quantity. But this is even made worse in situations when they even have fertilizers. As I said, the men, they will have to prioritize the use of fertilizers for cash crop instead of using it for food crop production. So the issue of power imbalance comes again. Now, asking or trying to find out if there has been, any increased risks, of gender-based violence in humanitarian crisis. I've mentioned one already, which was early and forced marriage. We've also had intimate partner violence, which I said in the Sahel increased up to 12%. That is a lot. But we also see that within humanitarian settings, for example, 1 out of 5 refugee women, that is statistics that are found online from the UN system, 1 out of 5 women refugees, or displaced women in communities in complex humanitarian settings have experienced, sexual violence. So it is something that should not be neglected. But as much as well, within humanitarian crisis as well, sexual reproductive health right issues are kind of put to a standstill. You will see that very few girls have frequent access to sexual reproductive health services. For example, when you look at the humanitarian needs overview for the Sahel region, it really shows that up to 2.3 million, girls, women, need GBV prevention risks. And only 5%, less than or just 5% of girls ages between 15 and 19, have access to modern contraceptives. This meaning that issues of teenage pregnancy, sexually, transmittable diseases would definitely hit on women or girls or even boys, and eventually making society more fragile than it is already. So why this or why we organize this, I'm really, really happy, because at times we try to come up with assumptions, without actually having, information, first-hand information from the field. And that is why I'm very, very happy that Plan is really making a lot of emphasis when it comes to research, when it comes to data collection. And I really, really applaud the organization for that, because with previous organization of experience in meetings, this is an issue that a lot of organizations have complained about, but we are already making a step, taking a bold step to make sure that we have this information. So I would like to, since I have a limited time, I have a lot to say, but would like to proceed by talking why, women economic empowerment is so important, within the context of humanitarian crisis and food security. We all know that women economic empowerment, is a key development attribute. It is a key development attribute, and for example, it gives women, which is our target, women and girls, the financial power and skill sets, to be able to take action or respond to crisis. I earlier mentioned that during the COVID-19 pandemic, we had measures that were instituted or put in place by governments to kind of slow down, the spread of the virus. And for those who probably could not go to their farms and they had money, for example, or they were engaged in other economic activities, did not really feel, the how can I say, the heat, I will use the term heat of being food insecure at that particular time, though at a longer time, some of them also found themselves within that environment. So women economic empowerment is very, very important, because it doesn't only give women, the voice, the financial power to take decisions, but also, it gives them the access, to participate. Because at most times when we are talking about solutions, they will always see, what do you bring to the table? When we're talking about food insecurity and how can we make, for example, a rural area food secure. Now we have areas that are facing, drought, or the land is not that fertile as it used to be. So with women that have financial power, they can purchase fertilizer that they could use within their farms and have like increased yields. But as well, as I said, they could also have the financial power, not only to use fertilizer, but also to purchase, genetically, or modified grains that have higher yields and also takes longer, have a shorter gestation period for them to be harvested. So in terms of what we Plan International, we are doing to make sure that gender is mainstreamed into our humanitarian response. I will say that I am one of them. Why I say I am one of them? Plan International is making sure that they engage, technical sound experts for training and policy advocacy. And Stacey, you've mentioned that what we do well within Plan International is advocacy and influencing. But as much as we have brought a lot of expertise on board, also having M&E experts that are there to support in terms of data collection. At Plan International, data is very, very important, and the need to collect sex, age, diversity, and disaggregated data is something that we have made it of almost important, because data gives us, an idea, a holistic idea of what is in the field, but it also helps us, to come up with targeted actions that will meet the situation that we are facing in the field. But as again,
sorry, Angela.
yes,
If you could just wrap up there. Sorry, I'm just going to make sure that we have enough time for Esther as well. But if
of
you want to
course.
give
So,
your final points, thanks.
okay, so I would also like to add that the engagement of affected population is really, really what we are doing, making sure that no one is left behind, and being accountable to affected population. So thank you so much, Stacey. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Angela. Honestly, that was very insightful, and I think I agree with everything that you said. And I think what you said about Plan using data collection as a priority, which is we need to know, and I think we are doing that, and I think we're striving and continuing to do that better and better. So and because of, like you said, having you and different technical expertise as well really does ensure that we're looking at the right places, and we are getting that collecting that data in the right way and being accountable as well, like you said. So thank you so much. And now, just to get the youth perspective as well, I'd like to introduce our third speaker. So joining us from the far north region of Cameroon is Esther Badvam. Welcome. She is 23-year-old teacher and youth activist from Noco in the far north region. She first started collaborating with Plan International Cameroon in 2018, when she was nominated by the delegation of basic education to support Plan's education work in Minawao camp as a volunteer. She volunteered in this capacity with Plan International for 1 year. In addition to teaching in the group Scolaire Privé Bilingual de Mokolo, she is also the treasurer of the Youth Association des Jeunes d'Amitié Développement Local de Mendez. Excuse me if I said that all wrong.
No problem.
And so they are a youth partner in Plan International's Lake Chad Basin program. So the EU multi-country program aimed at supporting youth groups to lead the stabilization efforts in the Lake Chad Basin. And as Esther has told us, one of the things she loves most as a teacher is working with children who have special needs. So thank you so much for joining us this morning, Esther. Really appreciate it. So I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you too. Thank you, Stacey. Thank you for the presentation. And I'm joyful, if I can say. Thank you very much. Okay, I've been presented, thanks for that. And I'm going to present the themes, the different things I'm to talk on. I'm to talk on the youth perspective on insecurity, on food insecurity. We see here food insecurity, as Angela Foma said, has been caused by many different aspects, both man-made and natural. She talked of drought. I'm also talking of drought. But talking of drought, we also have the case of drought that have been caused by what is partly natural and none. We have this issue of deforestation, that is the cutting down of trees without replanting. That does bring about a drought. Also, we have the poor agricultural system that people practices here. Looking at the extreme north in general, especially precisely in Mokolo, people practice but the crude one, that is they use their former methods while technology is innovating. Okay, we also have overgrazing. Till date, people are practicing overgrazing. People are rearing their animals on lands. Also, we have the aspect of war, as you format said. This issue is really disturbing here in the extreme north, especially in Mokolo. Going into it, we have the case of seizure of land. Since we know, since these terrorists have been attacking 11 years today, refugees have been coming into our places. Now, scarcity of land enters. So the amount of land that we have is no more sufficient for us, because we have to give some to those who came into so as to help them. So we also have that aspect. We have the aspect of climate changes. The climate changes because of many issues, as I mentioned, the issue of deforestation. And we also have the practice of bush burning, because still the people are burning down bushes to look for firewood for them to cook in their kitchens. That is mostly for household use. Okay, the impact of food insecurity touches it touches everybody, but I'm going to lay emphasis mostly on the right of the child and the equality gender. Looking at the right of the child, since there is scarcity of food, or sometimes none, sometimes the quality of food is not that tangible. We see how children are not encouraged to go to school, because most of them, you find them sleeping in class because they don't have quality food. We also have the problem of rural exodus. That is, since there is an influx of people, of refugees, and there is scarcity of land, youths prefer to go elsewhere, leaving behind aged ones that cannot really work. Why? We have that is why those are moving at the active population, those that can bring the innovation, those that can bring also development. Also, we have the problem of sicknesses, pandemic and diseases. Since there is a lack of food, that is, food is not really secured, we find children that are malnourished. Most of them are sometimes found at the street side begging, living, never thinking of school. You also have the problem of abandonance of home. Some prefer to leave their houses and live in other people places, made to have something to eat. Also, I'm going to aim to give some of the impacts on gender equality. This aspect is also a wow, let me just say, really a problem, because actually, taking the case of my place, we live with Muslims and they have their own cultures. We have in their own culture, at the age of 12 years old, young ladies are sent to marriage. Now, since food is insecure, there is insecurity of food. This favors these people to send their children at early ages, sometimes not even reaching to 12, to marriage, so as to overcome their needs, their familiar needs. And you see, most of the girls sometimes are sent to aged people, those that are really old, not those that are of their ages, and they'll find themselves getting married to more than 3 people till the end of their life. And also, we have this aspect of child labor, female labor. Women are used anyhow, as especially at the domestic domain, as Angela was saying. I'm coming back to it. Here, what is happening is what? If we see a family that have things, that is a family that is a bit have what to eat and can overcome their needs. Some people prefer to give their child to that person so as to take care of the child. Why? What is happening is the reverse. They don't really take care of the child, but they abuse the female child. Also, we have the problem of prostitution. Since there is the lack of sufficient food, this pushes women especially to prostitute themselves so as to overcome the needs of their families and themselves too. Okay, I'm going to give in another aspect of illiteracy. I'm talking of illiteracy. Most of the people at my area now, especially females, most of them are illiterate because of lack of concentration, since they are the weaker sex and they are considered to be those who are to sit in the house. Most of them are illiterate. That you find only some that really give up for education. Okay, I'm going to talk of the access to education been an issue in my country. In general, education have been an issue, of course, looking at the general plan, but coming into particular plans as my place, I'm always coming back to my place because there is much to solve out. You excuse me for that. And looking at it, you see how cultural practices, I will come back again to this issue of Muslims. There is another form of school here in my place. That is, a part of people prefer to send their children at the Quranic school, whereby they learn them not to open to the world, but to be tied to their cultures, making practice of their cultures and the Quran. So it makes it difficult for them to open to the, that is, a new educational system. That is, you have to be in your culture but open to the world. It makes them to be really difficult because up to date they have that mind to, they have the mind to continue and impose their cultures. We have the issue of early marriages that still continues. Children are sent to school at early ages. Imagine you going to marriage at the age of 12. Which kind of education are you going to have? And those getting married to you are those that are illiterate. So it will be difficult for them to send you to school. Also, we have the presence, the ignorance about the importance of education. Most of them does not really know the importance of education, even though association, organizations, and the state have been doing their best to through debates, discussion, and others, so as to give the importance of education. Some of them are still close to their cultures and doesn't want to open to the world. Okay, we also have the war aspect. Yes, the war aspect. Really, the war aspect doesn't makes you to concentrate on education because schools are closed down. Not only that, boundaries are closed down and businesses that parents depend on it is no more moving. So children will only find themselves in the street begging, find themselves doing things. Some become thieves because they need to they need to hide, or they need to have protection. That is the case. They need to have protection. So it is easy for them to think of education. And looking also at the aspect of poverty. Yes, some are poor, are really poor, not because they want it, but some aspect are, as I was former saying, the poor system of agriculture that we practices. We give in more but earns little, and that one really does not in general, because we cultivate, we take part to sell, that is so as to overcome our needs, and part to eat. Look, imagine you the practice also of polygamy houses where you find 4 or 5 women. They will cultivate little, most will be sales, will be sold, and the little will be left in the house. That will not even end up, they will not end the year with. So it becomes difficult. They will instead concentrate on going to the farm, even though it's no more, it's not giving something tangible for them to overcome their needs. Okay, we have also to yes.
Esther, sorry, I just realized it's just 11 a.m. But if you'd like to just give your final thought, if that's okay, and then we'll see if there's any questions, maybe.
Okay.
But just if you'd like to, if that's okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I have to. Okay, as final day, what I can say is what we are youth, of course, and I thank Plan International for giving me the floor to come and express that is the difficulties that my community faces. I also thank you for welcoming me and others. So as concerning the problems that we encounter here, I think more is to be done again. Floor should be given to youth so as to express their mind. Floor should be given to youth so as to give, that is, contribute to decision makings and others, because it's really important. Youth knows what they live more than aged one. Their own time have already passed. And us, we need to innovate things. We need to bring in more what is really changing and ameliorating our situation. So thank you. And I think that's what I have to say.
Well, Esther, thank you. That was a very, very powerful end. And I think you're absolutely so right. And we can see that across the world, like the youth is now, the youth is the future. And we need to make sure that the youth are listened to, because this is your world. This is, you know, you'll be here longer than us and whatnot. So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm just so like happy that you are there in Mokolo and working with Plan International, and we're very, honestly, it's just fantastic to know that you're there and working with these communities, and knowing that like you said, you always come back to your own context, but I think we all do that. We all come back to our own, and but it's important to do that as well. And I think especially for seminars like this, to bring in to expose these contexts to different people, because you know not everyone is aware. So I think it is really important and so valid. So thank you so much for that, for all your words, and Angela too. I just want to see if there's any questions. If anyone does have any questions, please put them into the chat box. I'll just see. I can't see any yet. I'm sure I'm seeing the right thing. But maybe just as a kind of final question from my side. Oh, okay, we have one. Okay, yeah, great question here. So what can we do to support girls and young women in West Africa? And that's a great question. Thank you, Ashley. So Esther and Angela, if you'd like to, I suppose we as in Plan International, but the collective we, just anyone who's on this call, what can we do to support girls and young women in West Africa? So Esther, if you'd like to go first, maybe.
Okay, of course. What can we do to support women in West Africa? I think, yes, I think many can be done. Looking at let me take the aspect of supporting them. We can that is the government have been making things, but what we can make in is to also sensibilize. That is going door to door sensitization. That is telling them the importance of the women's. We can also remove barriers. That is opening some centers that women will feel themselves that is open to the world, feel themselves being welcomed and really engaged. We also have to give them the floor to express themselves, either in debates, either in a discussion, so as to feel themselves really reinforcing the society. The case of mine, I think really Plan International, because I'm expressing my opinion, and is a lock. Is a lock for me. That's what I have to say.
I think I totally agree. Giving the floor, it's a great start. Anyway, giving that opportunity for women, I completely agree. And Angela, I suppose as your broader perspective of the Lake Chad region and just in general, and your previous experience, yeah, what else do you think we can do to support women and girls in West Africa?
Thank you so much, Stacey. I think Esther has rightly given some of the points in Lake Chad. The issue of access and participation for young girls and women is very, very key, especially in decision-making arenas, you know, giving them the place to exercise their leadership, as well as contribute on matters that really affect them, because as she rightly said, who else is well placed, you know, to talk on behalf of women and girls except themselves? They are the people well placed. But another issue is women economic empowerment. It is also key. It's always often said that one who has money has power, And if women, economic empowerment is not only financially, but also building their skills, and that is what we are really, really working on in the Lake Chad, especially in Difa region, making sure that youth, have a source of income, because with economic power is going to reduce issue of early and forced marriage, which has always been the case. But another thing that I could also say is, I think I've said about building girls and boys agency. It is something that we really need to do as well. So thank you. I don't want to take so much time.
Well, thank you very much. And again, I completely agree with what you've said. And I think the women's economic empowerment as well. And I think that's something that we as Plan International are trying to do more going forward, because like that, for various reasons, sensitization, we will continue, obviously, always throughout, but giving that seat at the table and that participation and that economic freedom to make the choices and kind of continue what they would prefer to do, I think I completely agree. And I thank you so much to both of you for all that you have shared with us today. To all the people the participants who've attended as well, thank you very much. As we've gone over time, I think we will have to leave it there, but I would imagine that we could continue on for another few hours. But if anybody does have any follow-up questions, or please feel free to get in contact with us at Plan International. We'd be happy to share further information. But with that, I would just like to say thank you so much, Esther, and thank you so much, Angela. It really has been a pleasure speaking with you, and a real joy, as you said, Esther, just to be a part of this conversation. So thank you very much, everybody. And hopefully we'll see you at the next seminar that we hold. So thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.